Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ministry Matters podcast. My name is Rohan, and along with my wife Jill, we serve as the lead pastors of a 3 small location multi-site church, C3 Camden, Picton and Thirroul in southwestern Sydney and the Illawarra. On this podcast, Jill and I discuss all matters ministry and share some of the things we've learned and are still learning along the way in our 30 plus years of pastoral ministry experience. It's our particular hope that this podcast will be of help to small church pastors and their teams and encourage you to continue to minister effectively to the wonderful people that God has entrusted into your care. The views that we express on this podcast are our own and not necessarily those of the church or denomination that we're a part of. We'd love to hear from you if you have any feedback, any comments or suggestions on any topics you'd like us to discuss in future episodes. To find out more about us or our church, check out the show notes for links to all the relevant socials and websites. So without any further ado, let's get into today's conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Ministry Matters podcast. Ministry does indeed matter, doesn't it, darling?
That's right, it does.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Well, we're going to talk about ministry / mission / kingdom work today, in terms of fulfilling God's purposes, how we, in part of small churches, can have an effective programs happening, an effective heart within the church for bringing God's kingdom to earth. I think we've titled it something like that, haven't we? Something like engaging a small church in the work of God's kingdom. So we're going to talk about all the different aspects of how do we do that, how have we done that, what values we have. Not saying everyone has to have the same values, but just sharing our heart and why we've always been very engaged in that kind of kingdom-focused, outward-focused care for others work. That's been a big part of our heart for a long time, hasn't it?
It has for a long time. I think there was probably a period of time when we were younger pastors where we didn't really have the revelation of the fact that God has called us as local churches to be community focused, to be missionally minded, to be...
Not so young. I would say that the revelation has developed over the last decade or so, really.
That's right. I think we would say we started to realise there was a mandate of Scripture probably in the earlier 2000s maybe.
Yeah, well, I would say, we in the 90s and we probably didn't grasp it at all, the early 2000s, then I took on a role as the community services pastor at our last church, working there. But even then in those early days, I don't think I grasped it. I think getting me out into the community helped me to grasp it. You probably already had it. But that's when it started to develop. This is an essential part of the gospel work, a valid part. Probably started with this is a valid part of the work of the gospel. And then in more recent years, theologically for me, it has gone from an understanding of this is a valid part of the gospel to this is an essential part of what it means to be a gospel partner with the Lord.
It's one of the big rocks in
it's a big rock value.
Big rock value in the right there in the foundations, and needs to be valued. It needs to be treated that way. We need to talk about it. We need to continue to convey God's heart because it's an essential for us. And I think because, I was raised in a little village of 300 people out in country New South Wales and then moved to Canberra when I left home. And there's something in me of community. And I was in a little church of about, I was counting the other day, I think probably the average attendance over the years when I was growing up there would have been less than 30.
Little Catholic church.
We went to church every week.
It wouldn't even be that now, probably in a country town, but
I doubt it would be that. I doubt there would be that many these days. There's no priests there, no local priests there anymore. And that little town had 3 local churches, I think, and I think there was 3. And there was always our family was involved in the Catholic Church, but there was always combined church activities, and so it was quite ecumenical.
Yep.
And there was not only that, there was a strong sense of that combined churches. They would work amongst the community and other things. There was a sporting community. There was just a small town of 300 people. You have to band together because you're remote.
Yeah, and
we're remote.
We're
not near anything
knock
else.
on each other's door and all that sort of stuff too. It was very much doing life together, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I always valued the idea of community, and I loved being in the church. Then later on being in Canberra and being young, training for ministry, and then going into ministry. Always loved the idea of the church community because I realised that when you live in the suburbs or you live in a city or you live in a bigger town, that you can become really isolated unless you intentionally become part of the community. And I loved that the church could be a community, but still just thought, oh, this is great for us, and when people come and join us, that's awesome. But like what we're talking about really today is more that we would reflect the kingdom out. So we were not necessarily just sitting inside the four walls of the church and waiting for people to come. That's great. I love church work, don't get me wrong. I love that. But we are talking about being the community outside the four walls. And that's more what we're talking about today, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think part of it is that growing up, there was such a focus on preach Jesus, preach the gospel, and we limited the gospel down to the salvation message. And don't get me wrong, just like you said, that is essential. I think the problem is we probably didn't have that other aspect to it, and we'd only, in a previous episode we talked about lifelong learners, and I think the problem was I was stuck in my mindset as to we'd hear things like, well, the most important thing is to get a person saved. The most important thing is to, preach. Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your mind and all your strength. And the second commandment is equally important, just the same important. Love your neighbor as yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I think what I've had to do is recalibrate my thinking and learning to realize what I do practically in the world and how I help and care for people is equally as important as the relationship with God. It's not that it's either or, it's actually both together. And that is in itself the full gospel message. And that's been a massive revelation. And if that's a challenge to you, hearing that for the first time and you're thinking, oh, that's just a social justice gospel or whatever it might be, I'm not watering down the importance of Jesus as Savior and he's the one who defeats the power of sin so we can experience eternal life. There is one way to the Father through Jesus. I'm not watering that down. What I am saying, not but and what I am saying is that is played out, and it played out in our lives through the care for the big four. And if you've never read this, you need probably good to read the Bible through the lens of and see the big four, I call them, the poor, the widow, the foreigner, and the orphan. And you will see those themes pulled up time and time and time and time and time and time again throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. Even the Apostle Paul, who's the great preacher of Jesus, goes to Jerusalem and they turn to him and say, it's great what you're preaching. We want you to remember to care for the poor. You think, well, why did they put that on there? It seems out of sync. And he says, this was the very thing I was eager to do. So I think the two are linked together. We preach Jesus and we show Jesus
having value
through the hands and feet actions that we have.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's value. It's a value for humanity. It's
valuing humanity.
Valuing,
yes,
serving and loving humanity, regardless of whether we actually ever see them come into our church and sit inside our four walls. We serve them, we love them, we value them, treat them as
image
bearers of
God.
Christ.
Yep, that's right.
Of God.
Yep. And God has imprinted his image into all humans. And so therefore we're obligated as kingdom bringers. If we are going to bring God's kingdom to earth, it will demand of us that we bring his kingdom values. And those values are things like love, peace, or sort of fruit of the Spirit you could list into there. They are justice instead of injustice. They are healing, they are provision, they are care, pastoral, all that stuff. Everything you can think of that heaven is like is what we are mandated by God to bring into the world around us. And so that will have practical implications in the way we do work outside of the four walls of the church, won't it?
Yeah, so it could be things that we do as individuals that we just, that people, that Christians do, and I think that's a great thing to do.
We should encourage that.
All of us to be loving our neighbours, to be looking into our own little neighbourhoods, communities, streets, places of influence, schools, wherever we are, and going, where can I maybe, be used here?
Where can I add those kingdom
add
values
value, that's right,
to others? Yep.
And then it could be things that the church does as well. We could, a church may take on some projects or take on, some different things or develop relationships with different aspects of the community where we can also join in and do that. We might have, we have food programs, we have youth performing arts program, we've had lots, various different things that we've
local and
run over the years.
Overseas as well. It's not
play
either
groups.
Or. Yep.
We have a play group where it is almost 100% community that attend. All our church families are all busy working. We have church and community, our community services staff that run it, but the people that come, which is 50 or so families, are registered for that play group, and they are entirely community, and we run that for the community. We don't run it for our church. We run it for the community.
That's right, and it's not run with the purpose of it's a means to an end. I think this is often the case, is that people think, well, we do quote unquote mission work as a means to an end, and we were chatting about even the word mission beforehand and saying how that doesn't always have the most positive connotation, and maybe part of the reason it doesn't have the positive connotation is because people have seen mission work as a means to an end, and rather than seeing that, no, the people are the end in themselves. We're all human beings. We're all on a journey towards God. We all need care and concern. And so the end is not bums on a seat on a Sunday or members in a church. The end is seeing the kingdom's values come into people's lives. And some of those people will come and meet Jesus and some won't. But we're not responsible for that bit. We're responsible for bringing those values and seeing these people are valuable in the image of God. We do a play group, or we do a creative arts group, or we provide food, or whatever other program that you can think of. We do that because people are worth it.
People matter.
People matter.
Want
That's
them
right.
to be valued. And one of the things our church has done, our Camden church has always met in a school, and we have developed a relationship with that school community, and we just help out with practical things at the school. We pay our rent there. We're not doing this to do them a favour because they give us free. We pay our rent. We are a customer of theirs from that perspective, I guess. But we want, and we also run a food program through their wellbeing team. But separate to that again, we say to the school executive, the principal and the exec, well, what do you need? What can we help you with? And one of the things that they like our assistance with is for us to do the sound, our team, some of our guys, to come in and do the sound for some of their events. So they do fundraisers, the PNF do fundraisers. Team. They come in and they set up the sound and they run the sound for the school events. There's no strings attached.
At first there was a little bit of sense of, you can't do this and you can't do that. But our guys, shout out to the guys, they just went, well, we're just here to serve and let's just do it and build that bridge of relationship and break down those barriers that are there. And they've done that really well.
The school does fundraising, trivia nights and things, and our guys go and do the sound. We went to one, didn't we?
We did go to one. And at Thirroul school with our Picton location, they get in there and do the gardens in the school. So, even as a small church, you don't have to take on massive amounts of projects. I think this has often been the challenge, hasn't it? We've experienced is people will say, oh, Pastor, we want to do this program and this program.
And they think that we'll take it on.
And it's hard. There's only so many buttons that you can press and actually get anything effectively done in the world. And there's always going to be more need out there than we have the ability to deal with. It's a bit like that previous episode of living in the gap between what we want to see and where we are, and we have to live with that tension. So what are some things we do with our people to encourage them around? We can't push every button. We can't do everything in a small church environment. I'm not even sure a massive mega church could do everything either, because there's just always going to be more need. But we tried to find a way to release people in their calling and encourage them to. We've had people doing work that isn't underneath the auspice of the church, and we just encourage that. But then we also have had to go, well, these are the 2 or 3 things that in this season we can do, haven't we? We've tried to walk that tension.
Yeah, because whatever we take on as a church, we have to manage. And so management and compliance, these are not small things. Everything we have to do volunteer onboarding, we have to look after our teams, we have to do risk assessments, we have to have insurance, we have to do child protection training, we have all these things to do. So it's not a small thing. You have to count the cost. You have to look and go, okay, every single thing we do we have to factor all of that in. Sometimes it's better just to say to people, look, why don't you just go and do that yourself? Go for your life.
We'll
go
support,
and do it.
We'll pray for you. Yeah, we'll champion you.
We'll champion you, but we can't necessarily take it on as a church project because there's only certain things that we
there's only so
have
much
the
of an
capacity
administrative
to do.
load to go around.
That would be obviously case by case, but I think these sort of things can easily get you can feel the pressure as a leader to feel like I've got to do, especially when this starts and it's really exciting. If you haven't been doing this kind of work, people start to get a heart for it, and then it's we've even when we do food programs, we'll do it. I was just saying this to someone the other day. We will like with the one we're doing at the moment, for example, we'll advertise it for a term, and we'll put a maximum amount on it, and then we'll say then we've got a wait list. So that way we know that if we don't have we give ourselves a sunset. You're not promising
open-ended.
Open-ended, because if we are volunteers, if it gets too much and people's situations change and we can't continue that.
When you first started the food program, I remember people were going, "Oh, this is only small.
Why aren't we doing
more?"
3 or 4 times this
and
and
you've been around the mountain enough times to go, I've learned the lesson. Let's
start
just
small.
start small. And
Let's get some momentum, and then we can increase it.
Little behold, you
bit by
found
bit.
yourself delivering extra food parcels
And then
things.
people
small
drop
number.
off, and then people go on holidays, and someone gets sick, and you realise, okay, maybe we should have, maybe I don't want it. You don't want it to all end on, be on your shoulders at the end of the day.
I remember many years ago, well-intended person said, "Let's do a garage sale," and they said, "Brian," and I said, "Oh, let's just be careful." Anyway, I wasn't careful. They were insistent on doing the garage sale. At the end of the day, we sold stuff, but honestly, the amount of money we made, we could have taken up an offering for them. This was for our charity work, and we could have taken up an offering for the amount of mental capacity it took to put this together. And then we had all this furniture left over that we had to then get trucks and move and stuff like that. So well-intended people, but it's okay to just do a few things and do them
Never
well.
let people start bringing in their old stuff and thinking it's a great idea to give it to the church because you might need it to give away to somebody.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, sorry, we don't take secondhand stuff.
We've got to store it somewhere.
Take it to Lifeline or Vinnie's.
Well, even at Lifeline, I remember the Lifeline down at Narellan. I remember being there one day and the guy was saying that his bill is $500,000 a year to get rid of rubbish. So I think it's like, what's our mindset here? So as a church, I would encourage us, and even if it's might be talking to a connect group leader, a small group leader right now, and you're thinking, what can we do as a little outreach kind of, careful with these very Christianese words, but how can we bring God's kingdom into the sphere of influence around the half a dozen of us in our small group? And I think if you sit down with them and just strategize that and talk to your pastor and say, what can we do and how can we fit in? And it can be something as simple as just, pooling resources for someone in the church who knows somebody who's going through a hard time. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering, life-changing. It can just be, let's just add value to because Jesus is about the one. He'll go after the one. So let's go after the one too.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we need, it could just be something really grassroots and simple, like you said. And it doesn't have to be, a whole program. It could just be a one. Let's just do something as a one-off and see how that goes.
Yes.
Let's just do a, collection of health, like we're doing this at the moment as well.
We had someone walk into Thirroul the other day, came in off the street and took a bag of homeless stuff that was supposed to be for the school and took a bag of homeless stuff that was being donated. And, this is like toiletries and just took it and came in before the service.
Personal hygiene products.
And then just left with a bag of them.
Left with a bag of them.
I just laughed and went, oh, well, it's not where it was supposed to go, but they must have needed it.
But I think that's the thing, is keeping your ear to the ground as to where the needs are and saying to the school wellbeing person or saying to someone who's your contact, do you guys need anything? I remember, our next door neighbour is a school principal at a public school. And during lockdown, we chatted a lot because we were all home and you couldn't talk to anyone except your neighbours. And, you couldn't couldn't travel more
We
than
literally
5
share
kilometres.
a wall with our neighbours, so
Yeah, and we'd, and I remember when school was going back and that adjustment and all of that, and it was really hard for teachers doing the online learning, and then they had to try and do some online and be there in person because schools still had to be open, and all of that sort of through that season. And I just was saying, asked her again, being curious. I talked about the other episode about being curious. I just said, well, what do you think the biggest needs are that you're seeing in families, and what do you think, what do you think, what's your gauge on how your team are coping? So from that conversation, we did 2 things. We did some gift vouchers for her to pass on to families, just for who are doing it tough, and we did a whole lot of just little treats for her staff. Just as a little one-off.
little one-offs.
A little one-off.
Yep.
But that was something we didn't do.
We did some little
As a
chocolate
big-
bags for HSC students, little.
Yep.
So
Wellbeing bags. for
wellbeing
little
bags.
HSC students doing that. It was a one-off. We didn't necessarily promise we'd do it again.
Yep.
We didn't do it again. Didn't do it last year, I don't think. We just did it the year before.
because we just you got to go with what the
We did-
resources are
We
at
had
the time.
people ask us once about doing some stuff in back to school packs for some refugee community, which we did.
Mm-hmm.
It was a one-off.
Yep.
Things like that are great to be engaged in, and you don't have to be in everything and being up to your eyeballs, sort of, and having it wear you down. You want it to be life
Well,
giving.
no, if you're a small church pastor, you're multitasking anyway, but you'll be people in your world. So I mean, we can find out what those needs are, and those short term. It's just some little things we've learned along the way. We've been doing this kind of work because I was running a community services department, 18 years ago. So we've been doing this kind of work for
Seen every project and program there is.
pretty much, yeah. And I think they're all great, but you just got to find your fit and find what's right for you. And often it relates to you come up with lots of ideas, but you've got to have volunteers. So you're better off doing a few things and doing them well and making a difference and actually adding value rather than just making promises that you're not able to keep. And that's why these short-term things is a good practical way to do it. I'm going to do a short-term project, not I'm going to do food from here until Jesus comes back and see how that goes and find out what's needed. You've been very good at going and talking to politicians and talking to other community centres and just saying, where's the need? You used the word
gaps?
grassroots before, and that's what you say. See, we've started
Where's the gaps?
We've started
Yeah.
a charity, and you say it's grassroots. You manage a charity, you say it's grassroots work. I mean, down at that bottom level, you're not interested in doing anything other than filling gaps and working with other people. So maybe in the last few minutes, there might be some people listening to this who are thinking, well, how can I do charity work? Maybe we can talk a little bit about how we went about that. And it's not as hard. We didn't find it as hard as we thought it was going to be. For many years, we thought, oh, no, you won't be able to get a tax-deductible charity in Australia. But we actually found it was maybe the things had changed. It wasn't too bad. We had to make some adjustments to our constitution and a few things.
Yeah,
But we
you
were
have
able
to
to do
be
it.
you have to be prepared to go into something when you go into something like that you're going to be under scrutiny of the government, and we need to be.
We'll talk to that a little bit because you've had a few interesting conversations with politicians around that scrutiny aspect.
Well, yeah, I think not everybody who is a church or is a Christian organisation has unfortunately behaved well in our country, and some of the the politicians and some of the people higher up haven't looked that weren't really looking that fondly at religious organisations because they've seen some things that haven't gone well, such as misuse of funds and exploitation of people and things that are
And
disappointing.
also using it as a means to an end.
Yeah,
Once again,
that's
that's
right.
the issue is you don't really care about people. You're just trying to get people to come to your church. And that's a philosophical challenge that every church leader needs to wrestle with. We came to that realization that no, the care for the poor and needy is in itself a part of the gospel. We don't need to preach about Jesus in every context all the time. That's our philosophical. You may have a different perspective in that. I'd say if you do, then it's probably not worth in our culture going down the path of looking for setting up a tax-deductible charity. For instance, when we set ours up, we pasted on the constitution that we had for years ago in our previous church, and the tax office came back to us in the process of evaluating it, and they said, look, it's too religious, basically. And we looked at it, and they wanted us to take the word Christ-centered out of it. And we looked at it and went, well, part of us thought, well, do we want to do that? But then we went, no, this work is Christ-centered. We don't need to put the word Christ-centered in there in order to be able to maintain that we're caring for the poor, the vulnerable, the hurting, the needy, those in hardship, all the various different things that our tax
disadvantage.
Yes, there's a category of about 10 different categories that fit under this. It's not just financially poor, it's hardship, distress, so well-being, all those sorts of things are in there. And so we went, well, that is gospel, that's Christ-centered. So we made a call and we said, well, okay, we're just going to remove that and get the tax deduction because we're blessed to be able to do that in this country. But you might not want to do that. If you want to be able to preach to Jesus at every turn, then you might need to not pursue a charity. But we have found a way where we do that. We genuinely in our heart care for people and will love people, but at the same time, we're unashamedly saying, we have volunteers from our church that are involved in this, and we will have people say to us, oh, I want to know more about your church work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you're in a place where you can do that. It's been invited and you can bring other volunteers in. And there are ways to do it that aren't deceptive, that are honest and transparent. And you've just got to figure that out before you go down the path of going for it. But it's not hard with the right help. Since then, I know of, since we've taken it, I know of 2 other C3 churches that have set up DGR charities, deductible gift recipient charities that are doing great work in this area.
So then if you go down that path, you register under ASIC and you have to comply with.
You register. I think you can do it as an incorporated association in New South Wales. In our case, or we're a company, which is with ASIC, but you don't have to be a company. You could do it as an incorporated association. But what you register with is the ACNC, the
ACNC.
Yeah, the ACNC.
That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, that's the details from ETAR bit that Jill's interested. But that's the register. That's the National Registry for Charities. That's what we're registered with. In fact, all churches should be registered with them too, because we're charities as well. We just don't have the same. Church doesn't operate under the same arm, doesn't have tax deductible status in the same way, but you register with them as an entity.
And I think back to what we were saying about the scrutiny that we will be under, we need to conduct ourselves at the highest standard in these areas. We should be doing that anyway.
Yeah,
that should be our aim. We should be people who are above. It
will only
reproach.
work if we, in our heart, have settled on the motive for doing it. So, if you can get anything out of what we're saying today, as a leader, or whether you're doing any kind of mission work, you need to first of all settle, what is my motive? If my motive is a means to an end, I don't think it will work, and I don't think biblically that's the right mean anyway. I think the means, as I said, the ends are the people themselves, those we care for. If you can get that settled, I think there's an integrity that comes with that. I genuinely care for you, no strings attached. I love you, no strings attached. I think that then brings an integrity that will lend itself towards a higher level of scrutiny.
Yeah, and hopefully we can win back some trust with the, in our country where there has been breaches of trust in these areas, and that's what we aim to do. All we can do, the only way we can do that is by continuing to keep the right heart motivation to serve with, authentic, in an authentic way, to keep doing the right thing, one step after another. And I've said that to other government leaders and politicians that we're sorry for the things that haven't gone well with religious organisations, and we will not that we did that, but on behalf of those others, and as far as it depends upon us, we want to do what we can to bring some healing and some reconciliation and some improvement to that. Yeah, that's right. So it's about the only way we can regain trust is to keep doing the right thing and be people of the highest integrity, which we should be anyway.
Absolutely. Well, we've talked a lot about local church stuff. Maybe we were going to touch on, we might do it in another future episode, is kind of talk about missions beyond our borders as well. That's part of going overseas. How can small churches do overseas mission work? We've got a few thoughts on that. We've partnered with other organisations. That's generally a good way to do it, rather than trying to do it all on your own. But maybe we'll make another episode out of that down the track, eh?
Yeah, just on working with other organisations, something else that might be good to mention as we finish is that often people will say, oh, can I come to your church and talk about the organisation that I run or the charity that I run or the work that I do and, and promote what I'm doing, and because they want, because they're after financial support or they're after volunteers, etc. And that would be just something we've learned along the way, is just to be mindful of that as well, to ensure that they are people that can be trusted, and they are people, because I think for our own integrity, the integrity of our churches, and integrity to our people, we should be careful with putting people in front of the church and having them put a pitch out for their thing if they are, or whether it's directly or indirectly, through their messaging and communications, if they're not someone who has
that history,
who's tried and trusted and
Yes.
and can be endorsed. So I think it's just something to be aware of, because we have seen a little bit and heard some stories around that. And it's probably a time when we wouldn't want that kind of thing happening. It can
Definitely.
be unhelpful.
Yeah, I think there's that integrity issue. There's also, back to what we said at the start, which is there's only so many buttons you can press. And it's not that we don't care, but we can't possibly do. As a pastor, I'm always getting emails, and back in the day it was things in the mail, but now it's emails. There's dozens of valuable causes out there, but I can't do them all.
Yes.
And I think as a pastor, as a leader, you've got to get comfortable with affirming and saying, that's fantastic. You're brilliant with this. When we had the bushfire relief and we had people wanting to do all this stuff, you had a statement that you started to use. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I think I already said it earlier. It's just I was talking about, we can only manage so much, really.
Yeah, you said
and I
that.
used to say to people that it's a great idea. It's probably outside the capacity of what we can manage right now.
Outside the scope of what we can manage.
Outside the scope of what we can manage, which
that's
we have
okay
to
to
look at what
say
we can
that.
manage, because managing in small churches, leadership, management, getting all the ducks in a row, making things run from week to week. There's a lot of different things to do.
There's a lot of work to do. And that's a good, honest answer, because people can feel like, I've gone doing this mission work and the church isn't supporting me or whatever. I get that they would feel that way. And so I think we need to be able to explain to people, no, it's not that we're not supporting, we're championing you, but there's only so much we can physically do. And we've only got so many volunteers to go around. So it's just an acknowledgement of our boundaries. Pete Scazzero says it's embracing our limitations. And it's totally fine in a small church context to say we're limited, and that's okay. We'd rather do a few things well. And so saying something like that's brilliant, but that's outside the scope of our abilities right now, or our capacity right now, is a good way to do that. And I think I was just listening to a podcast yesterday, actually. It wasn't a Christian podcast. They were talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that my mate Phil Weirden put me onto. But he made a comment that I've never heard before, and I thought, this doesn't surprise me. He was talking about how people go to places like Cambodia to work in orphanages. They get all this mail and they go and say, I'm going to work in an orphanage. It makes total sense to me. These actual places, some of these are not charities, they're businesses, illegal businesses, where they are setting them up as orphanages and getting people to pay a lot of money to come and do orphanage work, and they've actually stolen the children off their parents to create an orphanage. So that's just shocked my mind until I thought about it and went, I'm not surprised. That's human nature.
Yeah.
So I thought of that when you were sharing around integrity, tried and tested. We need to have people.
I'm
need to
not
have
just
runs
being a
on.
cynic that doesn't
You're
trust
not just
anyone.
being a cynic. No, that this does
we
happen.
have to something about that. I think as leaders is that we have to it's a little bit like being an advocate. We have to be wise as serpents and gentle as a dove.
Yeah.
We have to have a little bit of those those smarts about us, because unfortunately there have been the enemy would love to get in and bring distrust and bring confusion and cause mess in this area where God wants to bring freedom and relief for people from those chains of bondage that they're in, and there's so much good work that can be done, and we don't want other things to sabotage that.
True. So what I might do is, as we close off here, it just occurred to me that I put together a list of justice issues some years ago, and I've used it a few times in different contexts in our church. I might throw it in the show notes. If you're thinking, where do I begin? I've got a list of about 100 different areas of injustices in the world where I believe God has called us as his followers to.
Only 100.
Oh, it probably is nearly 100, I reckon. It's a lot. Where God has called us.
You like writing lists, don't you?
I do like writing lists, but for all the reasons that it's there in front of me. And so maybe this is a tool for some of you. You go, where do I begin? I've listed everything that I can possibly think of.
And register with ACNC, not with ASIC.
You don't register with ASIC. Well, you might have to register with ASIC, but start with
Don't follow my advice.
Actually, I think you need to register with the ASIC before you go to the ACNC, I think.
This is not professional advice.
Jill's not giving you professional legal advice when it comes to starting charities, that's for sure. But we can give you some pointers in the right direction if you need to, but it's not hard. So I'll put this list in the show notes. And if you're just thinking whether you're a connect group leader, a department leader, or a church leader, where do I begin? If you're just having a list of things out there that are things that are begging for the kingdom of God to come, areas where if God's values came into those things, they would look different. Some of them are big, some of them are small, but it might just be that something, this is what I say when I've done this, every person's wired to bring the kingdom into some arena of their life. There might just be something in you that stirs and you go, I can do something about that. Doesn't mean you have to go out there and start a charity and solve it tomorrow. It could just be that you start to become, like our previous episode, a lifelong learner and just start to go, I'm going to learn about this. I've heard Christine Kane say when she walked into Thessaloniki and saw all the stuff about the, child sex trafficking, she rang a friend, and I've heard her say, is this for real? She didn't even know what it was. And she's, Greek Australian, and she saw it. And then that set her on her journey towards doing something about it. So
I heard her speak about that just last week, actually. I was listening to her, and she was saying that she actually felt, and I didn't know this, that because people knew her as an evangelist, she was an evangelist, and that she started speaking about those justice issues and about that. It just arrested her heart when she found out about so much of this trafficking that was going on, child slavery, and she said that she had quite a lot of resistance from that message. People were like, "Oh, what do you mean? I thought you were an evangelist. What are you talking about all this justice stuff for?" She's like, "Are you kidding? This is the heart
gospel
of God."
Yeah, that's right.
And what is
the poor, the widow, the foreigner, and the orphan.
That's right.
And I reckon
that the oppressed would be set free.
Trafficking fits into all of those in some form or other. So I think if you've got something you want to start somewhere, just start to learn. I'm happy to make that list available to you. It's not copyrighted. Use it in your church. Use it wherever. If it's going to be helpful to just spark some passion for bringing God's kingdom to earth in those different arenas of life.
Yeah, great.
All right. Well, that's enough for today. So we will talk to you on the next episode. Thanks for being with us.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ministry Matters podcast. Hey, if this podcast has been an encouragement to you or you think it could be to others, we'd be so grateful if you'd share it with your friends on the socials. So before you head back into your day, if you could take a moment to like our Facebook and Instagram pages and share them with your friends, that would be awesome. You can find us by searching @Ministry Matters Podcast, all one word. And one last thing that just helps the podcast algorithm to work for us. We'd really appreciate it if you could take a minute to rate and review our podcast. Be sure to click that follow button wherever you listen to your podcasts so every new episode will be loaded straight to your device. For those of you watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when a new episode drops. All the links you need are in the show notes. So thanks so much for being with us today, and we look forward to talking to you in the next episode.